everyone, welcome back to Glue La La. If you are new here, my name is Jess, and on my channel I like to create home decor on a budget. If that sounds fun to you, I'd love it if you would hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of my future videos. And make sure you say hi in the comments. If you are already subscribed, welcome back and let me know how your week is going so far. I always love chatting with you in the comments. Today I'm getting ready for St. Patrick's Day. I have created 5 pieces using a lot of items found at the Dollar Tree. I love making decor that has that rustic farmhouse vibe, so for St. Patrick's Day I wanted decorations that still had a farmhouse feel but with a touch of whimsy. Alright everyone, let's get started. For the first project, I'm going to start with one of these 6 by 8 inch canvases from the Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to use my utility knife to remove the canvas from the frame. But I'm not going to get rid of the canvas because I'm actually going to use it later on in the project. And then I removed the canvas off the back, but I didn't bother taking the staples out because I knew they wouldn't be in my way. Then I'm using this matte acrylic paint by Apple Barrel in the color Holly Branch, and I gave the frame 1 coat. Now acrylic paint doesn't have as much of an opaque coverage as chalk paint does, but I was okay with that because I never mind if some of the wood grain shows through on most of the projects I do. I took one of these glitter foam shamrocks from the Dollar Tree, and on the back side of the darker green one I just took a little bit of the plaster color by Waverly and I dry brushed it the whole way around this shamrock, and I kind of concentrated the color more towards the outside of the shamrock, and I just did a little bit of a lighter touch towards the middle. And then I created a simple bow just using 2 lengths of jute twine, and I hot glued that to the top of the stem of the shamrock. Once the paint on my frame had dried, I took the same plaster color and I just did dry brushing all over the outside and the inside of the frame just to give it a little bit more of a distressed look. While that was drying, I took the canvas that I had removed, and you can see there's a little crease around the outside edge where it kind of folded over the canvas originally. So I used that as my guide to know where to cut so that it would fit on the back of the frame. And then I just did a test fit, and I had to trim a little bit more off of the one end. So when I got the fit how I liked it, I took the canvas and I laid it onto a piece of chipboard just to make it a little bit more sturdy. And I used my hot glue, and I put hot glue on the back side of the canvas and I glued it to the chipboard, and I used my utility knife then to cut the chipboard down to size, and then I was able to glue the chipboard and the canvas onto the back side of the frame. To add a little bit of texture to the frame, I decided to take some jute twine, and I started by hot gluing it onto the back, and I just wrapped it around about 3 or 4 times on the top of the frame, and then I went ahead and repeated that on the bottom of the frame as well. I knew that I wanted the shamrock to sort of raise up off of the canvas a little bit, so I just took a craft stick and I cut a few small pieces out, and I hot glued it onto the back of the shamrock, and I realized that wasn't going to be thick enough to raise it up to even notice, so then I cut 3 more pieces and just stacked those on top of the pieces I had glued down, and then I was able to hot glue the shamrock right onto the center of the canvas. I love how this piece turned out. You'll have to let me know in the comments what you think. For the second project, I'm taking one of these tinsel shamrocks from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just removing all of the garland from the plastic frame. This is always really easy to do because it's never glued down or anything. There's just little pegs in there that you kind of have to unweave it from. Then I use my wire cutters and I cut all the little pegs off of the inside of each of the shamrock petals. And then this is where I should have stopped, and I don't know why. For some reason I thought that the petals should be moved up closer to the top one, so I cut them off and re-glued them. But if you decide to do this, don't do that because it's just going to be a pain in the butt if you do. Then I took a car wash cloth and I cut strips out that were about 1.25 inches wide, and I cut a little over half the cloth into strips like that. And I laid it on the plastic frame, and what I was trying to do was just cover up the entire plastic frame with the strips of the car wash cloth. And I knew that I've worked with this cloth so much in the past that I knew I didn't have to be very neat with it because it's pretty forgiving. Like, it kind of blends into itself. So as I'm gluing it on, it looks pretty rough right now, but in the end it'll all come together. And I just made sure that I put strips to cover the front and the back of the plastic frame. And after I had it covered, I just went through and cut off any of the sharp corners that were left on the frame. So once I had the frame covered with the cloth, I took my jute and I just started at the bottom of the stem and I wrapped it around a few times, and then I just started spiral wrapping it the whole way around the shamrock. So I worked my way up the stem, and then once I got to the petals, because the opening in the petals isn't big enough for my jute to fit through, I just had to cut off a piece and then keep wrapping it around. But you can see here, this is why it didn't matter how patchworky the cloth went onto the frame, because once the jute was wrapped around it, it all blended in together. Then to decorate the center of the shamrock, I had created a small, well, it wasn't really small, it was kind of a medium-sized burlap bow, and I used some burlap ribbon and some green and white gingham ribbon, and I just glued a piece of a craft stick in the center of the shamrock just to act as a base to be able to glue my bow to. And here's a look at how this one turned out. I really think it's cute, and it really has a lot of that rustic farmhouse look that I like. You'll have to let me know what you think. For the next project, I took one of these wooden shamrocks from the Dollar Tree, and the stem on this one felt really flimsy to me. Like, I felt like I could really bend it back and forth, and I was afraid it was going to break. So I just glued a piece of a craft stick to the back of the shamrock. Then I took my plaster color by Waverly and I gave the whole front side one quick coat of the plaster. Then, using that holly branch color again by Apple Barrel, I decided to color the inner part of the petals with that, but we're going to cover it up with something a little bit later, but I just needed a green base. Then I took the color Celery by Waverly, and I didn't clean off my brush from the holly branch because I wanted to darken up that celery color just a little bit. And I used that to dry brush around the whole outside of the shamrock just to give it a little bit more distressing. So once everything had dried, I took the floral moss from the Dollar Tree and I just started hot gluing down onto the green part that I had painted. Now, if you're going to do this, make sure that you put a ton of the floral moss down on top of the hot glue because it will kind of seep up through and you don't want to burn yourself. So after I had the whole petal colored, I just took my scissors, and because it was raised up, it was easy to follow along with my scissors to trim everything up. And then I was able to see where I was missing a little bit, so then I could go back through and hot glue some more moss down. And I did that to all three of the center petals, and I just kept trimming until everything looked a little bit neat. Then I created a double bow using some black and white striped ribbon, and I just hot glued that to the center. Because there were already holes in the shamrock, I just decided to take 2 lengths of jute twine, and I always like to weave it in from the back side so that the little knot shows through the front. I just think that adds a really cute touch anytime that I want to hang something. I really like how this one turned out, and I like how it looks sitting on this window frame that I created. I'll make sure I link that video in the description box. So for the next project, I took one of these little square pencil cups from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just using some painter's tape to kind of give me an equal distance from the top and the bottom. And I used my Cricut to make this word lucky, but you could use letter stickers from the Dollar Tree too if you don't have a Cricut. So once I had the word in place on my cup, I took some of that green and white gingham ribbon from the Dollar Tree and I started hot gluing it around the bottom. And whenever I hot glue thinner ribbon like this, I like to get it in place and then really kind of smash the glue down with my finger so that it doesn't look bumpy through the ribbon once the glue sets. And once I had the ribbon glued the whole way around the bottom, I repeated that around the top of the word also. Next, I cut some floral foam down to fit inside of the container. Then I took some of these cute shamrock picks from the Dollar Tree and I just started layering in as many as I could throughout the top of the cup. And I decided just to stick with the lighter green color for mine, but I know that the Dollar Tree does carry both colors of those picks. Then I took one of these glitter shamrock picks. It's kind of on like it almost feels like a barbecue skewer. So I created just a simple bow with some jute and I cut the pick part down and I just stuck that right in the center of the flowers. And I think this piece would look really cute on a tiered tray too. And if you don't know, I am on Instagram at GlueLaLa, so make sure you go follow me over there as well. For the next project, I decided to create kind of a top hat topiary. So I grabbed one of these plastic leprechaun hats from the Dollar Tree. And it's the same as the shamrock I did earlier. I just pulled all of that garland off of there. And I used my wire cutters to cut all the little pegs off. And then I went around and I cut the grid off from the top of the hat as well, because I wanted the top of the hat to just be open. Then using another one of these car wash cloths, I laid the base piece of the hat, I guess it would be the brim of the hat, down on the cloth, and then I folded the cloth over and hot glued everything into place. And then once the glue had set, I just used my scissors to cut around the outside edge of the brim of the hat. And once I had everything cut off, I just used my hot glue to kind of pinch the two seams together. I ran a little bit of hot glue on the outside of the frame and I just pinched the cloth together to give it a nice finished look. So once I had the brim of the hat done, then I moved on to the top hat part of the hat, and I started out by hot gluing along one of the vertical parts of the cage part of the hat, I guess you'd call it. And then all I had to do was kind of glue and roll across the cloth. And because I left it open on both ends, I was able to just trim off the excess, and then I could use a little bit of hot glue to tuck in the ends on both ends of the hat. So it gave it a nice finished look. Once I had all the cloth glued into place, I took my scissors and I kind of found the center of the brim part of that hat, and I just gave it a little snip because I just needed to be able to fit a dowel through there. So then I hot glued the top part of the hat back onto the brim of the hat. Then I cut a piece of floral foam kind of in a similar shape to the hat, sort of in a cone shape, so that I could fit it down into the center of the top hat. I had one of these little buckets that I had got from the Dollar Tree at Christmas time, but I know they always have something similar like that at the Dollar Tree. Sometimes they're printed for the different holidays. So for this one, I just took the Truffle color by Waverly and I gave the outside of the bucket 2 coats, and I did paint down along the inside just a bit so that none of that green would show through. So once I had both coats on, I took the plaster color and I just did a little bit of dry brushing around the edges of the bucket just to give it a little bit more of that distressing that I like so much. To create a band around the hat, I found this green burlap ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and it was a little bit too wide for this size hat, so I cut about 1/4 inch off of each side, which cut the wire edge off of the ribbon, which was fine because I really didn't need to mold it into any kind of shape. And once I had cut it off, I pulled out a few extra rows of the burlap just to kind of give it that fringy look there. And then once I had that in place, I had taken a pack of these wooden numbers from the Dollar Tree and I picked out the numbers 1 and 7, and I just added a little bit of the antique wax by Waverly onto those numbers, and then I wiped the excess off with a baby wipe. Then using 2 of these shamrocks, I hot glued those onto the band, and then I hot glued the number 17 right onto the shamrocks since St. Patrick's Day is on March 17th. And I thought that turned out really cute. It kind of reminded me of the Mad Hatter's hat in Alice in Wonderland. So if you have any kind of Alice in Wonderland themed parties coming up, I would grab a couple extra of these leprechaun hats from the Dollar Tree because I think those would be really cute for that kind of party. To make this look more like a topiary, I took a bunch of greenery and some little white flowers that I had already had in my stash, and I just started arranging them around the top of the hat. So I kind of put some of that boxwood greenery in as sort of a base layer, and then I added some of these taller white flowers in just to give it a little bit more height. And I had forgotten to stain the dowel rod, so I did the same thing with the antique wax. I just brushed it on and then wiped it off with a baby wipe so that it had a little bit of a lighter look because I like that lighter wood. Then I took the bucket and I filled it with chunks of floral foam, and I used my hot glue again with this floral moss, and I just gave it kind of a base cover with the floral moss. And again, make sure you add a lot of floral moss because that glue will sneak up through there and burn your fingers. So this is going to be a little bit hard to see because of the angle of my camera, but I just added a little bit of hot glue to the bottom of the dowel and stuck it into the bucket, and then I added hot glue to the top of the dowel rod, and I added the hat on to the top. And I really like how this came out. I think this is definitely probably my favorite one I did today. I just think that hat is so cute and whimsical. Here's a final look at all of the projects. I think my favorite is probably the top hat topiary. I just think it's so cute and it kind of has that rustic feel, but it also looks kind of whimsical too. Let me know in the comments which one is your favorite. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you like these projects, make sure you hit that thumbs up button because it really does help my channel grow. And make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss my future videos. I post a new DIY every Wednesday. Thank you again, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye!